Born in June 5th, 1945 in Huron, South Dakota.
Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, I lived there till I turned 21 when I went into basic training. It was great. I came from a huge family and had a lot of support. Didn't think I'd get there yet, but had four brothers, four sisters. My mom and dad just really supportive, into sports. So it was nice traveling around the state of South Dakota, getting to play a little high school basketball, baseball, and great life. I always said I wished my two kids could have had the life I grew up in, but I didn't want to be there as an adult to raise them. My dad worked for the city of Huron. He was kind of like a maintenance man, did some like garbage collecting through the day, and evenings he was a janitor for the Farmers and Merchants Bank. My mom, early on, I didn't know this was when I was pretty young. She was a college grad that was a school teacher. She taught in a little town of Broadland, South Dakota for a few years, and then start having these 9 children. So that became her full-time job. And she passed away when I was 14. So we lost her when I was pretty young. So that's what I kind of remember of my mom.
You graduated high school in 63?
1963.
Yeah, so we're very, very early into Vietnam. Had you had any idea what was going on over there at the time?
There was rumors that things were happening, but nothing like serious to think that, we're all going to go to Vietnam or something like that. It wasn't, it was pretty minor. I don't think there was a lot of discussion about it. There was a few people that I knew from Huron that went into the military, and I guess, their thoughts were they might end up there if it starts to escalate, but it wasn't quite there yet.
What did you do after high school?
Went to, for 2 years, well, a year and a half actually, but Huron College, which is right there in the same city that I grew up in, and tried to play a little basketball there. So that didn't work out too well. I got injured my first game out of the chute after I made the freshman team and first game, and but I stuck in there for a year and a half, and then I just kind of decided there again, not thinking Vietnam or anything, is I took a semester break because I didn't know what I really wanted to do, and that was probably about the time Vietnam started to escalate, and there was a lot of talk about getting drafted and things like that. 4 brothers that I had, 3 of them did have military experience. All 3 were Navy. Pretty much peacetime. My oldest brother, Don, served right after Korea. He got out of high school around 52, 53, so Korea was pretty well gone. So he enjoyed his 4 years on a ship, most of it. My next brother, Milford, he joined, and pretty much like peacetime too. It was probably around 56, 57 he joined through 61. They all just served 4 years. But he was in like an Airedale. He was just in the Air Corps, and really had a nice life in the Navy. Joined the Navy to see the world. You always hear that. So, and then brother Bob kind of did the same thing, and he graduated 1960, I think it was 59, 60. So he was in through 63, 64. I guess he got out. So that was kind of like peacetime. But they all loved the military. I mean, it was pretty uneventful. There's a couple of skirmishes. I think Kennedy had the Cuba thing going, but nothing major. So I thought, how do I get out of Huron, South Dakota? No money. Wasn't going to get a scholarship to play ball anymore. I worked hard to do that. So I decided, hey, join the Navy and, like I say, see the world. And
so your brothers influenced that too, you think, a little bit?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I think, just through that time, and yeah. I went down basic training in San Diego. I went in June of 1966, just turned 21, June 5th, my birthday, and it was a good experience. I mean, having 3 brothers go through it, I had pretty good ideas. everybody thinks it's physical, but being the sport guy that I am, I'm not a rough, tough football player or anything like that, but played, basketball, baseball, stayed in shape, and so the physical part was a piece of cake, but it's the mental. I think that most people, when they, as you well know, you said you were military, that how do you get through the mental part of basic training? But it was all good, and they treated me good. They always say if you're a squared away sailor in boot camp, you like a 4.0. If you get a 4.0 rating, I got to get pulled out of my company, and the whole basic training was really for the graduation part of it. So you just trained and you learned all the Navy stuff on the ships and everything to go with it. But I got to go over and carry my South Dakota flag. So that was kind of like an honor to get pulled out of my company to go over and do that. So I had a pretty good time.
Was that part of the graduation ceremony?
And that was part of the graduation then, yeah.
Had not heard that before. That's
very nice. So
neat.
Because Vietnam was building up then, and a lot of people then at that time, I'm not saying they're dodging the draft, but all of that started coming in about that time. The heavy part of, and I wasn't going to ever be a draft dodger, let's say. But I didn't really want to go to the Marine Corps or the Army at the time. I wanted some kind of schooling, and so when I got the basic, I guess I passed enough tests to qualify me for schools. And I was hoping, like not my oldest brother, but the other two, I was hoping to get maybe like into the Air Corps and get on an aircraft carrier. I love basketball. I'd get to be basketball every day and things like that. But I got signed up for, it was the only school available, it was Hospital Corps School. So after basic training, and this was in San Diego, right there at Balboa Naval Hospital, went through it was pretty close to about a 5-month training to get experience to be, a lot of the guys that probably get into that field want to become either a nurse or some kind of a medical field or doctors, and they kind of give you that kind of a training. It's pretty good schooling for it, but I had no intentions of doing anything like that. But I thought, if I have to go through this schooling and I get, at a hospital and see the world, like I say, join the Navy to see the world, I could probably become like an X-ray technician or a pharmacist mate and, learn something like that. But that didn't happen. The Marine Corps recruit their Navy personnel from the Navy.
Right.
So, and then Vietnam, as I said, I went up to the Naval Hospital up in Oakland, California. And when I got my orders after I graduated from Hospital Corps School, it was like, hey, Doc Busch, you get to go to either, 2 months, maybe up to 2 years, you'll be at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital up in Oakland. So I said, yeah, that's pretty good. Never been to the Bay Area. In fact, I'd never really been out of South Dakota. So this is all new to me to be, California. And so I thought that was pretty big time. If I got a couple of years up in San Francisco, but I think on the 59th day, it was USMC, the Marine Corps, the United States Marine Corps, wants you.
Do you think that training prepared you for what you were going to see in Vietnam?
A lot of it did, because you really did learn everything about the body. You learned everything about, not at that time thinking Vietnam and that, but there was a lot of classes on, if you had a lot of bleeding and different injuries and how would you, cater to that. But as I said, it was more probably getting training to be like an LVN or a nurse, something to that effect. I think that's what that schooling was for them anyway, to be like a ward corpsman, they called it at naval hospitals. The ward that I got, they called it the dirty orthopedic ward. And most of the...
This was in Oakland?
Up in Oakland.
Yeah, okay.
Where the Vietnam returnees coming back, they were losing arms and legs. And so that was the duty, and that probably got me programmed a lot for not knowing yet at the time I'm going to Vietnam. But
Did that change your views or change how you saw Vietnam at all? Did you have a sense anymore about the war at that time?
No, I think being a military, it was you have a job to go do, so you go do it, and not knowing yet that I'm going to that. So I was just, if there was Army or Marines that were kind of filtered through before they sent them home, you got their war stories in that, but I think the the ending part would be and you kind of make buddies with a few of them, or not buddies so much, but you get to know them a little bit better. They might be there for a week or a month or whatever before they rehab enough to either get to go home or patched up enough to go back to military duties and that. But I got my orders. That was the kicker, because they'd say, "Hey, Doc Busch, you'll be back here in 30 days." And so that was probably my first sense, but still not knowing where I was going to go. And I probably could have even gone down to, I thought at first I was going to go to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, and I thought, hey, I'm going to get the Med cruise, I'm going to go sail the Mediterranean with a Navy ship like I wanted to do. But they changed my orders, and it was for Camp Pendleton. So then you knew you were getting assigned to Vietnam.
Just a matter of time. Yeah. When did you get orders to Vietnam?
When?
Yeah.
I went to Hospital Corps School May, so the little
May of
1967.
Okay.
So now the build up.
Yep.
Now it's happening. There was a lot of, and that's why they were really pushing. They probably would put maybe 40, 50 in peacetime things through that field medical training for the Marine Corps, but. Yeah. I was in a group. I should have brought those pictures probably with me. There was about 300 of us, just Navy corpsmen that were made up to get geared. And so what you were doing there was trying to become a Marine, the tough running and hoorah stuff. And
really? So they put you through their own training?
A little bit of a training for the physical part.
Right.
They had to weed out, if you can't do it. So a lot of it was. And we did, I don't know if you've ever been to Oceanside, California and that, but we'd go up into those hills. We'd march out of our little barracks. It was on one side of I-5 and go underneath this little, and then go up and do kind of like a bivouac, I guess you would call it. A bivouac would be like you're going out into a battle zone area. Yeah. And then they'd have, with the Marines, so you were assigned to like a platoon, and you were playing war games, so they had their war games going on. So if they had a dummy set up, you'd run up to it, and if it had a sucking chest wound or something like that, then that's where I probably started getting the training. I might be going to Vietnam now.
As you're doing this training, are they evaluating you, or are they scoring you? Or?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you had to know what you were doing,
yeah.
Or they probably wouldn't send you over there. So yeah, most of the training was probably just if I passed, which I did, the Hospital Corps School stuff, and then did okay working the 2 months working the wards up in Oakland, kind of prepped you for it too. So I got to go home, see my family, for 2 weeks from Camp Pendleton, and then I flew out of San Diego. We flew up to Anchorage, Alaska, down to Tokyo, Japan, then jumped on military planes to Okinawa. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the staging area where you kind of got rid of all your civilian stuff, and you won't need this. You take your dog tag and these green uniform. That's not Navy. No. It's supposed to be blue or white. Yeah. And then we jumped on C-130s, flew right into Da Nang.
From Okinawa?
From Okinawa,
okay.
Yeah. And then from Da Nang, there was kind of a staging area, if I recall. It's been, 55 years ago now, probably. But I think we spent the night or something there. Well, Da Nang was kind of a bigger base, bigger city, so it wasn't like anything unusual, other than the fact that, wow, here I'm in Vietnam now. But, I guess you're thinking about where am I going to go? Who am I going to get assigned to? And that was probably the biggest issue. Where am I going next? And so you spent the night, and we got orders. You're going north, and that was never a good sign because the further north you went in Vietnam, the heavier the battles got, And I flew up to Phu Bai, was a area that was the 3rd Marine Division, the headquarters. That's where the Marines had their base. They had all the medical facilities. So when I flew in there, that was a bigger base too. Picture maybe something a little bit bigger than a MASH unit, let's say, on TV, if you related to that MASH unit. It would be something like that. They had the doctors, the nurses, mess halls, you had food, hot food, lived in tents, you got to sleep in a bed, So I thought, well, this isn't too bad, but then I think it was like an overnight. Now you go over to this tent, and now I'm getting assigned to my unit, and they said it's Lima 3-3. No clue what that meant, but you're going up one step further north. So that put me on the DMZ. Now you're starting to think, this isn't Navy. I didn't join the Navy to do this,
So who was Lima 3-3?
Lima 3-3 was a unit that's attached to the 3rd Marine Battalion. We fought up what they called I Corps, the top I Corps. It was right up on the DMZ, which the DMZ is the demilitarized zone. So it was all the civilians pretty well evacuated. So you were really, it was combat. It was a year of combat. So it was Dong Ha was the big base that was set up, and we were hearing over the plane. As soon as you get off the plane, there might be incoming rounds coming from North Vietnam, because that was just about a mile, maybe a mile and a half north. They had all their heavy artillery were really dug in deep over the other side of the river. So that was my first training. It was like a movie, just hurry, get over here, get to this bunker, And then I got assigned, to my unit. And you mentioned to me, I know in the hallway, which I always get a kick out of people do, is Navy's people aren't supposed to know how to shoot guns and stuff. You always hear that from an Army guy or a Marine. But the gunny sergeant, when he said, "Hey, Doc Busch, where are you going?" I said, "Lima 3-3. And he said, "Well, here's your issue. You're 45. He said, and he was serious, I think. I'm pretty sure. He said, "We know you Navy guys really don't know how to use those. But in the event you get overrun, you don't want to be a POW." So
He taught you how to
you didn't want to be a POW. So that's what your 45's for.
Okay.
Anyway.
What were your initial duties when you were assigned?
I went out with the on a 6-by. That's like a big, huge truck, where they carted people out. And I went out to my first site, and it was like an outpost. It was called the Rock Pile. The McNamara's Wall was made up of like 5 different bases. There was 6 eventually, but it was Dong Ha was the main big rear area. And there was Jilin, Cantien, the Rock Pile, Kalu, and then Quezon. Everybody pretty much heard and knows about Quezon. But I spent my first probably 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe about a month at the Rock Pile, and then I went out to that next base in Kalu. And primary duties, being attached to the Marine Corps, was they're made up of platoons. Lima 3-3. There's like 4 different companies in. I think it was like Lima and Kilo and India and probably one other unit. But anyway, I was assigned to Lima then, as I said, and there was like 4 different platoons that made up that company. So basically what it was is we were there to seek out enemy and destroy, I guess their missions were to. So you go out on daily patrols, not every day, but probably 3, 4. Sometimes if we had enough corpsmen, I only had to go out maybe 2, 3 times. Sometimes I was the only corpsman, just due to not everybody died over there, but rotation, getting sick, injured, or getting killed in action possibly. So it was like just a steady stream of patrols through the day and then set up outposts. They called them ambushes at night. So you'd go out just there again trying to seek enemy, because the enemy were looking to get us, you know, on all those bases there.
So what were those living conditions like for you?
We called them hooches, I guess. There was just dig a hole in the ground and you know, to eliminate when you did take incoming. We took a lot of incoming all the time, heavy artillery or rockets, motor rounds, everything. Not on a daily basis, but maybe on a weekly basis. So then there was times, there was every day, but they were just kind of like digging a deep, deep grave, and they put some aircraft landing strips on top with sandbags to stop, you know, direct hit probably you wouldn't make it, but it stopped all the shrapnel. So probably what you tried to have is in those platoons, 3, 4, maybe 5 guys living down in one of those bunkers at a time, you know, just so. My favorite saying was like living in the mud and the blood with no beer. The old Johnny Cash saying. So
Yeah. How about the food?
food was, for the most part, if you were out like in Kahlua and that, was sea rations. Sea rations were just made up of, you know, canned food, and your best buddy was, they called it a P-38, I think, maybe 9. It was your can opener. You put that with your dog tag, and if you lost that, you'd starve to death probably. So you, that was your buddy. There were times, like back at the rock pile, and especially Dong Ha, but I never really got back to Dong Ha but twice on my whole tour there. They'd try to get hot meals out to you. They'd bring them from Dong Ha. So if the convoy could make it out, or if the choppers could bring them in, and then we'd once in a while get hot food. But most part it was sea rations.
So you grew up in Huron, South Dakota. Do you think you made friends with folks from different social and racial ethnic backgrounds that you might not have ever met had you not joined the military?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it was really a combination of a lot. Boot camp, you know, different people, and Huron had you know, very few. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 families that were Afro-American, black, but and then being sports, we recruited football player, basketball players to come in, and so it wasn't like you know, their group. That was probably the most interaction I had. Native Americans being South Dakota, sure. You know, we once in a while played college ball once with everybody loves this one, is one of my buddies, Homer White Buffalo from Cheyenne Eagle Butte Reservation. He come to here in college to play basketball for a year.
Describe the friendships you made with your fellow Marines and other corpsmen that you might have.
Made a few friends, corpsmen, not like buddies, but just through hospital corps school. So you know, we'd get our weekends off, so we'd we're all new to San Diego, try to experience that, you know, just whatever. If we didn't get paid that weekend, we'd go across the street to Balboa Park and just hang out there because we didn't have any money. The next weekend we go downtown San Diego and have a good time. How about in
Vietnam, the friendships you made?
Vietnam was, I started out with, when I left that first 6x, that truck I got on, I had like probably 6 or 7 us was on that truck that was going out to the rock pile. And so I buddied up with, I guess your biggest fear being a Navy guy with all these tough Marines was, am I going to be able to fit in? And so that was probably the biggest hurdle I thought I'd have to get over. But there was 3 Marines on there, and one of my Navy, like a supervisor kind of guy that was going, he was already, you know, had years in. He was like an E5. They call them hospitalmen, second classes. But one was Bart Haynes, the other Jim Gilbert, the other guy was a Jim Redford, and this Mike Horner. And then there was one other Navy corpsman. I didn't know him that well, but we all went out to the rock pile. So I really buddied up with Bart, Jim, and Mike Horner, their leader. And all 3 got assigned and went out to Callao together. So the camaraderie with the Marine Corps is, you always hear about that, is very tight. Mm-hmm. So I really buddied up to them, and the rest did too. There was a lot of, platoon leaders that probably been in a lot of combat 3, 4, 5 months before I got there. I got there in the tail end of June of 1967. So there was like 2 or 3 different sergeants that I buddied up to, because then they just, here's what you need to do to stay alive. And,
did you ever have any time off, any time? And if you did, what'd you do for recreational activity? If you had any time off?
Not in the front line. Our downtime would be hidden in your bunker. You could never go without your flak jacket and your helmet, because the threat of incoming was hourly, daily. I mean, it was I guess we'd kid around. Somebody might have had a little football, so you'd play a little catch, But I think on my downtime in the rear area was being the medical guy, was trying to keep everything, pretty sanitary and clean. And there was always it wasn't like daily and everything, but just the bathroom situations, there was no, so you'd make sure the Marine, if he had to do his duty, to don't do it here, but go with your e-tool and make sure
so
that.
You had to instruct them on that, huh?
Well, some, you just didn't want it happening.
Sure.
But it was keeping that clean, and I guess the big scare there too is people getting malaria. So I had to make sure I'd make my rounds, make sure they're taking malaria pills, and then just the camaraderie. I'd go over to the motor section. Never buddied up with too many there, but I did make friends with some of them, and like you said, they're all walks of life. I think like that Jim Gilbert was Oregon, Bart was your hometown, New Jersey. Mike Horner was Oregon, and Jim Redford, Texas. I mean, we just came from all over, and had, majority of them probably Caucasian, white guys, but
sure.
We had a few blacks and Native Americans, but yeah.
So the music scene in the country is changing during 67, 68. Does any of that, either the music, movies, books at the time, that if you hear a song or see a movie today, takes you back to your time in Vietnam?
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, pretty much after we got back, and what really draws me, the friendship, if I'm going to bond with somebody, is probably their liking of sports. If it ends in ball, I'm going to like you. Football, basketball, baseball, and the whole, or rock and roll music. I just was into rock and roll music.
Any one song you hear today that you remember from back then?
Well, a couple. I think, and I think this was a lot of Vietnam veteran songs. Was the Animals had that great song? We gotta get out of this place. If it's that was probably number one. Maybe two was. I think it was the Box Tops had "Give Me a Ticket for an Airplane," and every time we'd see that C-130, it was why I should be on that one. Why am I still here? But that was probably a couple of the big. And then if somebody did have, up in the area we were at, we didn't have access to news or media and TV. But if somebody had a little if they came back maybe from R&R and they had a little radio, it seemed like, if there was ever a song that I ever heard and they just played it repeatedly, was "A Spooky Little Girl Like You." I don't know if you know that song, but spooky.
Yeah,
but
another good one.
So when I hear that one, it still rings a bell. Kind of takes me back there, hearing the choppers and hearing that.
Any, while you were over there, any memorable holidays stand out for you? A lot of times troops would get served special meals, or they do something special for them. Anything like that occur while you were there?
I think the best I had, I always wanted, you always had one tour for R&R, they called it. Rest and relaxation was the R&R part of it. And I wanted to go to Australia or Hawaii. One of those two that were the options, but my name kept getting passed by because I was the new guy. So Penang, Malaysia come up right around Christmas time. So that probably had to be the best. I've been in the bush, they called it, out in the field, out in the combat zone, and no hot meals, no, just, me and another Marine Corps. Didn't stay buddies, but we got to know each other pretty good because we went on R&R together. Juan Lovato is his name, and we went to Penang, Malaysia for 5 days.
You were the
And that was
first-
through Christmas season.
You're
Pardon?
the first one we've interviewed that said they went to Malaysia for R&R. Usually they go to Australia or Thailand or Hong Kong or Hawaii.
Everybody
You went
wanted-
to Malaysia.
Everybody wanted Bangkok. But I was probably stressed out to the point of get me out of here, or I might do something crazy or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when I heard nobody wants Penang or however that come up,
You grabbed it.
I said, hey, I'm ready. Because that got me down to Da Nang for a day or two. And
Sure.
it was Christmas time. I had no thoughts of even going because here they had cheeseburgers and bathrooms, and I got water out of a faucet. And I just wanted to stay there, but I got asked if I wanted to go over, and we saw the big choppers coming in. The Bob Hope show was coming in. The USO brought him. So we just looked at him at a distance and said, hey, I'm going to stay here, and nobody else is around, and enjoy Da Nang.
So you stayed Da Nang.
Well, that was our stopover.
Okay.
We had to get cleaned up,
Yeah.
get all the bush, all of the jungle boot, the mud and the blood off us, like we were saying. And then I flew out of Da Nang to Penang, Malaysia.
So
And I
what
had
was
my
that like? What did you do there?
Oh, it was great. I mean, here again, I've never really been out of South Dakota, but they loved us there. They thought, I guess, at least the places they recommended us to visit and things. We got to go to the movies, nice restaurants, and drink a beer, and kind of just get humanized for that 5 days. So it was excellent. And having Juan Lovato, like I said, bonded with him.
Mhm.
He didn't have any sports with the ball behind it, but he was a high school wrestler, so he had a little sports blood in him. So, but he's still alive today. I'm still in touch with him, but not like as a good friend. I haven't been in touch for a while, but we were in touch. I think a lot of the Marines, I haven't reached out to them too much, but I've had about 5 just call, and not to get together so much, and that was, hey, Doc Busch, you still alive? And we bonded that way. But we'll probably, if you get into the Bart Haynes story, I'm really tight with Jim Gilbert, who's still alive, and this Robert Pugh.
Yeah.
We bonded and did a lot together, not a lot, a few things together since we got back.
Describe the leadership in your unit as far up as you could see.
Boy, I thought we had the best. In fact, when I first got assigned there at the rock pile, I got to meet and greet and welcome aboard, coming into the Lima 3-3. His name was John Ripley. He was a captain, Marine Corps at the time. And he since became one of the more decorated Vietnam veterans. He's got a monument at Quantico Marines because of how he handled the Ripley's Raiders, we were called. And if you were part of his unit from, I think it was like November '67 to or March, I think it was, to November of '67, then you were part of that. So I've got my name on the monument, on the pedestal part of it. It's got all the names of all the Marines that served under Ripley's Raiders. So
Was he your company commander?
he was our Lima 3-3 company commander. And then when I first got in country, I mentioned earlier the 3-4 sergeants that ran the platoons were excellent, took me under their wings, and I give Marine Corps a lot of credit for that. They're just that camaraderie. Once a Marine, you're always a Marine, and I almost feel like, even though I'm a Navy guy, that I'm probably more attached to Marines, and Marines love their corpsmen. So yeah. Not so much medicine, because there again, I wasn't a medical guy. I went through the training for it, but what I think Vietnam that saved, even though there was a lot of lives lost, but there was so many lives saved by how they did their evacuation and triage, and that was really brought up, that saved tons of lives. I think how they, not so much where we were at, you either patched up the injury or, try to get, but calling in a chopper to get it in as quick as possible to get it back to either Dong Ha or down to that Battalion 8 stations in Fubai, and it expedited, and I think it saved a ton of lives. So, but I don't think as far as, we didn't carry that much medicine. That I think I just had, if somebody was injured bad enough, maybe the morphine and things, but that wasn't anything new. But engineers were on their way to Quezon with a convoy, and they got hit pretty good. We went out to save them, and I was on one of those 6x trucks, me and my buddy Jim Gilbert, in fact, who's still alive. I just talked to him a couple of weeks ago to let him know I'm doing this. He was pretty honored at the fact that I got to do this. So, but we hit either an anti-tank mine or Bouncing Betty, they called it. That was kind of one of the NVA, North Vietnamese Army, NVA people that booby trap type things. And the truck I was on hit one, boom, and exploded, blew up the truck. And of course, your first thought is, when you're getting off it, is the enemy's right there, you're going to get attacked and do the...
You were on the one that got blown up?
Yeah, I was in the back end of it. And I don't know this for a fact, but I did hear that the two in the cab died. I mean, the truck, and I do have pictures of that this Robert Pugh sent to me. And the rest of us in the back somehow lucked out, got it. Probably, shell-shocked. A little shrapnel here and there probably, but then we just got off thinking the enemy's there, so bam, you're just back to your mission. And thank God the enemy was not there. After they did what they did to the engineers, I guess they did their duty, so they were gone. That one's probably one that, if I have to think about any at night, might be that.
Were you able to help the engineer unit after that, or
No, they were on their own up, and we just stayed in the back. We didn't get hit too heavy. I probably patched up a few injuries, just nothing major, but from that truck, probably bouncing up, coming back down. We, took kind of a beating that way, so. There was so many. I don't know if there was one worse than the other. It was the bad part, I told you about the 5, 6 of us on that 6x my first day to go to the Rock. 3 of them died. So those 3 days really stick out in my mind a lot. So
how were they killed?
Bart Haynes was the first one. We went up to and really went into a real small little outpost. Just one of those McNamara walls was Cantien, and that was like just maybe a mile from the Ben Hai River, the North Vietnam. We set up another little post. They called it the C2 bridge. And I don't know if that C2 stood for Cantien or if that was the grid where on the map that we were at. But anyway, it was about a half mile south of Cantien. And we took over for a unit that got overrun just a few days before that. A lot of casualties, So we went up there to set up our spot, and they got overrun because they just didn't take the precautionary things to save themselves. They didn't put up the barriers so that was our job, probably, to try to save the base. And the C2 bridge wasn't like a huge bridge or anything. I think it was just enough of a bridge to get the convoy to get it up to Cantien, the big outpost there. And Bart, with 2 brand new Marines that just come in probably within a few days, he took them out for their training to set up on our little outpost, probably about 10, 15 yards out in front of us. And the enemy walked in motor rounds that night. And one of them landed right probably between the 3 of them. And that's the night Bart Haynes died, didn't it? He took a piece of shrapnel, I guess, behind here that, and all I knew from Robert Pugh, the other Marine that I've been in touch with lately, he was best friends with Bart.
Was he there, though, with him that night?
He was, we were all in that one little area. I mean, I mean, it was really a small little area that we were in, even that C2 Bridge outpost we were at. So, but he went screaming for Doc Busch, I guess, because Robert Pugh told me this story like 45 years later. I didn't know this, but me and another, our radio man, went out to try to save whoever got hit. If it was Bart screaming, or if it was, and it's pretty chaotic. You know, you're getting the rounds coming in, all of a sudden the shooting, the motors, and everything coming at you. So, but we grabbed one of the Marines. We saved him. He took a lot of shrapnel through the ankle and the leg. And this Ron Treat, the radio man, and I pulled him back to our bunker, but Bart didn't make it.
Bart died there at the scene?
Almost me, yeah. When I went back over, we called him BAS, was a battalion aid station, comparable to a MASH unit on TV, but not quite that big, no doctors, no. But it had medical people that were in there that acted as like a practice nurse or that level. So when I took my injured one over, then I heard that next morning that Bart didn't make it, so.
So that was probably your worst day?
Night, yeah, I had a night, yeah. Then Jim Redford, that was another patrol that we had. He'd been in country a little bit longer than me. He was going home, I think, around the 1st of May of '68. We were out on his last little bivouac, if you want to call it a big mission. We went up around Cantillon and then come back down to there was one village in the area, but they called it Leatherneck Square. And nobody had been through there in months, they said. Nobody. So we did one little sweep, and Jim decided that he wanted to help out his fellow Marines. He wasn't part of Lima 3-3. He was a scout, they called it. He learned to speak Vietnamese, and if we did capture any of them, it was his job to try to get much information from it. He was a college-educated guy. He was like 6'7", would never gotten drafted, but he wanted to serve his country and be a Marine, I guess. The nicest guy you'd want to meet. Loved basketball, so we fought between Llewellyn Sindor, who's now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he loved his Elvin Hayes because he was a Texas guy. And so that was my bond with him. But here he is, 6'7", and he. Marines were just having a tough time hacking through the elephant grass, the jungle with the machetes, and so Jim decided to help out this guy, and being 6'7", sniper, gets him right. He's going home a couple of weeks. The best day, I guess, was, hey, Doc, the jet's sitting in Da Nang to take you to Norton Air Force Base in California. Saying goodbye, but getting on that big plane back to the United States was always be the greatest day. But over there, I guess monsoons hit. We hadn't had food in so long, and somehow we ended up back at the other little base. We didn't stay there very long, but it was Thanksgiving and hot meals come in. So we got to run over and actually get some mashed potatoes and turkey. And that was probably with my big tall guy fighting basketball with him. And just, it was like, I don't know if the enemy thought Thanksgiving was a great day to take a break, but no incoming, no threat of it. We just thought we had a free day and had some turkey and mashed potatoes. We didn't get that very often. So, no. I mean, the camaraderie with the Marines and getting to know all of them, that was probably pretty beneficial. So, not really. I met up a couple as we went to a rear area. There was couple of units that were Australia, and that was about my only contact. And it was really not contact. It was just, hey, where are you from? What are you doing? Kind of thing. It was probably, like I said, I never really got back to the rear area. I spent my full 13 months, well, 12 and a half, 11 and a half of it up in the bush, up in the combat zone. So, but I did come back to Dong Ha for one trip was on my way to R&R. To Penang, Malaysia. And the other one is Navy, even though you were out in the field and all these conditions, if you wanted to get promoted, you still had to go back to the rear, take a test. And
Really?
and I was just I was an E3 hospitalman, they called it. So I wanted to get my petty officer stripes and that. So I did go back for another couple of days and spent, which was nice. They did have tents, housing, wooden structured, like, so that was kind of nice. But the only bad part is they'd still got incoming. So I'd missed my trench and my hooch I told you about. That I felt a little more comfortable if incoming started coming. I knew right where to go and who was going to take care of me if I got hit.
Sure.
But probably just maybe through the lunch hall or something like that, might have just briefly. But we heard nothing but good news, with the Australians and the Koreans and all the help we were getting. We were fighting up in that area where I'm at. They called it the NVA. It was North Vietnamese Army. So if you were Vietnamese, you were either NVA or hardly any Viet Cong, but you'd be a Viet Cong. So if we saw civilians, it was pretty much the enemy.
Okay.
However, we did have, and I guess here's a good story then. We did have around the rock pile a doctor, because it was a little bit bigger fire base, had a doctor and a few more Navy corpsmen that had been in that was training to be maybe nurses and things like that. We'd go to Cam Lo, that was a little village. So we'd go there to try to help anybody that needed the kids, if they were sick, sores, any medical treatment they needed. So we probably interacted with them. I didn't speak Vietnamese or anything, but they were appreciative then, but that's probably about the only time I ever had, and we only did that probably. They probably did it once a month, but I probably only did that maybe 2 times because I was always pretty busy with the 4 platoons and not having enough corpsmen to keep up those patrols and ambushes. Not much because of the service, and it wasn't that I wanted to, and I didn't want my dad to know how bad I had it.
So you kept most of that to yourself.
He passed away the year I got back,
Oh,
and I don't know if it works.
it's okay.
Can imagine my son had to go to war.
Yeah.
Probably kill me too. So
Did you get any news about what was going on back home? Because now you're there at 68 towards the end of your tour, and so you have the civil rights movement, you have a lot of issues, turmoil going on back home.
most of that was coming when I come back home. It was July of '68 that I got to come home, and we started hearing things, but it was still, I don't think people were really at that point yet. Somebody mentioned, the Pentagon Papers or something like that with Ellsberg or something, and there was the 7 from Chicago. They're starting to get this little protest with how do we get rid of Johnson and McNamara and the people that created this war. Well, they didn't create it. It goes back to the 40s and the 50s that probably started that, but no, I think because of where I was at, had I been Dong Ha, Da Nang, out of combat, then they were looking at TVs and probably the radio. We didn't even have news people come up I'll recall anybody ever coming up to interview us because they just didn't want to come up there. They might come up to Dong Ha, as far as Dong Ha, and hey, and one day I'm out of here because incoming. I mean, it was just a daily diet almost, or you were thinking it was going to happen every day. So, but yeah, it really didn't hit until I got home. And
yeah, any of that social turmoil make it over to your unit? And what I'm talking now about some of the racial riots and the racial tensions.
pretty much after I come home, we saw a lot of that, but not in Vietnam. No, I didn't have any. The camaraderie was such that I don't recall. And I was, and I'm really thankful of this, I was probably with one of the best units that you'd want to be with, being Lima 3-3. I mean, they're highly thought of. We didn't have a whole lot of casualties. We didn't have a lot of, but the camaraderie, I think, because of all the sergeants and the lieutenants and a guy like Captain Ripley to run, kept that kind of free. I mean, I'm sure there was some.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get two Marines together without clashing probably, but they loved their corpsman, so they protected me. Yeah, yeah. July, the first part of July in 1968. I actually got a little break. I told you I stayed in the bush, or out in the field, I should say, the combat zone, probably for about 11 of those months. But I did get to kind of come back down a little bit south to a Fubai. That was the 3rd Med Battalions. But that was shortly after, Tet hit. Fubai, just a few miles up the road, was Way City. That's everybody heard through Tet what Way did. Quezon was over here, Way here. But it was kind of, I guess they always structured it like to get humanized again. Where you're getting ready to go home, so I had a little brief break in that last maybe 15, 30 days at Fubai before I actually did fly home. But getting down to Da Nang, start seeing my personal stuff, getting ready to fly back to Okinawa now to get all my other stuff, and it was a great day. It's the worst part of it is I think when you survive it, sometimes that's hard. Why me and not you? You know what I mean? So that was probably the toughest part.
How about coming back into the States? What was that like?
Oh, that was, we flew into Norton Air Force Base, just Orange County, kind of like that's when we first started hearing about, we had a couple of days there to get all of our gear and get, cleaned up and, ready to get orders to where you're going to go, your next assignment. But I remember getting into a taxi cab. There was like 4 of us to head home. I was going back home to South Dakota then. And he said, it's getting a little nasty here in the States and if you're in your uniform, don't stick around outside that terminal. There might be a sniper up there. There's people that don't like you military people now. And that was probably the first signs of. But there again, my family at home made it great for my return. Oh, there was
So
probably
you didn't experience any of the anti-war kind of sentiment?
just a few, if we were out and about, I had like 30 days leave when I got home. So if we were drinking beer at Charlie's Pizza Hut or something here in South Dakota, somebody might kind of throw out something to the effect of, not maybe personally to me, because I was a Navy corpsman. I wasn't, Marine Corps with M16 and that, but baby killer, kind of, things even in here in South Dakota that kind of come up a little bit. Not bad. I mean, 99% were very supportive. Buy you a beer, do that. But that was where I was picking up being. And then I was going to get assigned back to California, and that's where we probably had more. I was still not attached to the Marines any longer, but I was on a Marine Corps base. I was at a naval hospital in Camp Pendleton, which
How
is
long did you
Oceans.
stay in after you came home?
I was just, I'm a 4-year, that's all I did. But I had almost 2 years left when I think that's what really saved me then. That was, I had that 2 years, and I really look back at it now, and I think of anybody like you being an Army guy or a Marine that was Vietnam, let's say me, come home the 1st of July, and now you're out of the service the 15th of July, now go back to Kansas or go back to Wisconsin, just that had to be tough on them, very tough. But I had 2 years left, and made some real good friends at Camp Pendleton. We didn't want to be in the medical field anymore. I don't want to do this, so we got it like administrative. I worked for the up in the mail room, they called it, and then the front OD's desk, officer of the day desk. So I was kind of a messenger and doing different duties for the commanding officer, the executive, and the administrative officer. So they were all captains in the Navy, and so I had a pretty good job for 2 years. And then I just made a couple of my best friends ever from that. And I think none of us went to any psychologist, none of us went to any training, didn't ever think post-traumatic stress, and even though we probably had tough years.
Yeah.
But I think the camaraderie, just drinking beer, going to ball games, rock and roll concerts for 2 years.
So you didn't have too much trouble adjusting to life afterwards because of those 2 years?
Not really.
Yeah.
I mean, a few nightmares here and there, and I probably always will. You might, some of these things, when you think about it, hear a chopper come over the head, especially if it's a Huey or a Chinook, or then it was especially in Camp Pendleton.
Sure.
You'd hear but everybody said, doesn't that scare you to hear that? And I said, they shooting artillery. And I said, that's outgoing. You love that. But when it starts coming,
that's different.
Where's my bunker?
That's right.
So,
have you had any? Well, you said you stay in contact with some of these veterans after the war. You still stay in contact with
my
them?
best friend, Chuck Bongers, he was a Navy corpsman. We weren't in Vietnam together, but we were in the same, up there, that I Corps, the DMZ. But he was with a real tough unit. We felt like we were there to seek out the enemy, to go on those patrols, ambush, to look for him. It seemed like the enemy looked for Bravo 19 for whatever reasons. They just had a long, tough year. But we met up together at Camp Pendleton. He come home a few months before I did. He was wounded. He didn't come home from the injuries, but he got a Purple Heart, recouped in Kyushu, Japan, I think it was, and then they sent him back, and they didn't put him out in the bush again. They just kept him in the rear area and worked in different places there. But we bonded there at Camp Pendleton, and we're best friends today. So he's got a tough go right now with it. He got Parkinson's from Agent Orange, and so he's diabetic, Agent Orange. I tell people I lucked out. All I got out of it was prostate cancer, but I got it cured. So I've been cured for 10 years, and VA was very good to me for.
That's good.
Yeah.
So we'll go back a little bit and talk about Bart Haynes. He was one of your best buddies while you were in Vietnam.
Yes.
And you said the way you guys bonded was through music. And how did that come about?
Well, there again, as you try to meet up friends, I don't care if you're in school, class, college, sports, just who do you bond with? And as I mentioned, sports and rock and roll would probably do it. So if we're out on a patrol or something like that, it was, hey, Doc, you're a new guy from here. What was the biggest hit when you come from the States? What was the #1 hit or something like that? So we named off a few songs or whatever. And so then we try to sing along with it. And that's probably when I picked up that he was a drummer in this little garage band. And so we hit it off. He was just, and Bart was one of the first, as I said, when you go to a Marine Corps unit, similar to, let's say you went to play football or something like that, you want to be a tough guy. You can't be the weak guy down on the bench. But then I found out that all the Marines aren't just big, tough, rough. Bart Haynes was probably the nicest, youngest. I thought he was 12 years old. He was just a young kid, and he was probably only 17 anyway, or 18 at the time. And I'm a little bit older because I had that couple of years of college, or that 2 years I took the break, and then my training. And so I was getting to be 22, 23 years old when I was in Vietnam, and he was like 19, probably 20 if he would have lived.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just talking, the new wave of, everybody knew the Beatles, but not too many knew about the Rolling Stones and the Animals, and that was Bart. He loved that music,
So he had
and I
knowledge.
did. Yeah.
So he was a drummer in a band, but there was something else. He had another band member that went on to become pretty famous.
I think, I probably buried my Vietnam experience as much as possible. I talked to my buddy Chuck Bongers about it, and I got another buddy, Mike Damer, that if we ever get together, then we chat. But the rest is, we kind of buried our uniforms and went on with our lives. But 45 years later, another friend of Bart's was a Marine. We met up in Oklahoma City at Toby Keith's restaurant. We hadn't seen, talked to each other in, like I said, 45 years probably. So we had a nice lunch. Toby Keith even bought it for us. He wasn't there, but the waitress said we called him and we'll pick up the tab. They loved our story, and probably about a year later, those pictures that I brought along with me had just a lot of stuff about Robert Pugh and Jim Gilbert, my friends, and me, and then this little display of Bart Haynes. And I started reading about Bart, my buddy, and I flipped it over, and it goes like, Bart, not only was he just a drummer in a little rinky-dink garage band, he was the drummer for the Castiles, Freehold, New Jersey. I tried to look up Bart. I've tried to look up a few different Marines that I was tied with, but I'm not a computer nut. We didn't have computer nuts, 20, 30 years ago. And
Right.
I did look up that one Ron Treat, the radio man one, and I did find family, and I found out this was probably a good 10, 12 years. He died trying to skydive. But Bart was another one that was hard. I worked New Jersey, Philadelphia, New Jersey, probably 20 years ago now. And I tried to look him up thinking he was from like Trenton or somebody in Trenton, Vietnam, and never could find it. But Robert Pugh, then meeting him, sends me months later this little packet with all the pictures, and that's the one that said, here's Bart with Bruce Springsteen. He's a drummer in a band for the Bruce Springsteen.
Wow.
And later in my life, my career, I was in the banking industry for a few years, but then I got picked up by the federal government for disaster loan duty, kind of like partnership with FEMA. And so anytime there was a big major storms, battles, or not battles, but
you did after the war?
afterwards I did, for like 27, off and on, 27 years.
Wow.
I did a lot of disaster. Well, Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast,
Right.
hit Jersey big time. And I got assigned to Brunswick. So I thought, well, now I've got the computer, maybe I'll try to find Bart Haynes. And so I went over to and I was in the public information office too so I always had to go in when there's a disaster, any little community like Freehold. I had to go find the mayor, let him know what SBA is doing, and SBA is Small Business Administration. And the Chamber of Commerce and all that. At least people started telling me, we knew Bart, we knew the family, and I guess Bart, when he was a kid, he worked for a funeral home, shoveling snow off the sidewalks, mowing the lawns and stuff. So I guess he was really in touch with, their names were Higgins at a funeral home. So I thought, well, I'm going to go over and see if they know anything about Bart Haynes, right? Then it just built up from there, and that's probably why I'm here. I think I mentioned to you or Brian, I'm not sure, there's probably 500 people that should be here, not me. But the story with Bart tied to Bruce Springsteen. Well, anyway, I go over to this funeral home and I knock on the back door, and this guy comes out and, oh yeah, I'm a Higgins, but you want my dad, but he passed away. He knew Bart, and he was probably about the same age as us.
Yeah.
Us then, Bart's age, but he said, come on in. And I said, well, they had the service for him here, and I think Robert Pugh, that friend I talked about, actually escorted the body back. So now I'm standing where Pugh was, and here's Bart's coffin, and we just kind of chatted about, and this Mr. Higgins guy that runs the funeral home thought my story was good enough, so he got a hold of this Kevin Coyne, who's has a lot to do with Bruce Springsteen's archives and things with Melissa. He called him over, so he come over, and now we're sitting talking about Bart and my story, which I told you that night that it happened, and thought it was over. Okay, great. Now we got a tour of Freehold. They took me where Bart's little memorial is there in the downtown, and where he lived. I guess they tore it down. There's where they played band, and over here, this next street's where Bruce Springsteen grew up. And I thought, okay, great. I'm happy. Go back to Brunswick, and then I get a call from Glenn Cashin, and then I find out that's Bruce's that's his cousin, and they're keeping this foundation archive thing alive for Bart Haynes. And I thought, wow, great. So this was Hurricane Sandy was probably about 8, 9, 10 years ago now. And Glenn Cashin's kept this alive ever since. He just kept saying, we're going to bring you back to Freehold. We want you to be party of this. But that has never come about. They're still working on it, I think. It's kind of a Bruce Springsteen foundation archives that they're trying to put together. And then I guess he knew a couple other guys that were Vietnam veterans. And then I think through my son and my good buddy Chuck, I started hearing that Bruce started talking about Vietnam, and I just thought he was kind of one of these lefty guys that wouldn't like Vietnam veterans and all this. But every concert, not every, but a couple of the concerts, I guess he dedicated things, and he'd start talking about my buddy Bart Haynes, and so that's how that come about. So
yeah, well,
keeping it live.
I appreciate you sharing that. What do you think that war meant to you and your generation?
Because I survived it, I've always thought that I'm a better person for it. There was a reason I probably had to get out of Huron, South Dakota. It was just that was my ticket to get out. So I'll never ever look at it as negative. I never, the politics of it maybe kind of made you work on it. You just kind of wonder if it got that nasty, that bad, why? And then you try to go back, like you mentioned earlier. Why didn't they see this in 1961, 62, 63, 64, and then let it build up to where it was? And but we did our duty, and I don't care if you're World War II. Randy and I were talking about this in our little discussion last night. There's always going to be somebody here that probably would favor Hitler, World War II, if we had our media that we have today. So, but why it got to that point, and then like you said, 68 was just really traumatic. Being a rock and roll guy, my first album back I thought this great group, the Chicago Transit Authority, remember? And they're called Chicago now. But that first album had On the Streets of Chicago, that it was a great song, but it was really the whole world's watching. That was Hubert Humphrey with the candidacy, and then that's the big turn. That was the big turn, but I still supported, what we're doing in Vietnam, and gosh, we got POWs over there. We still got people fighting, and so I've never had a negative bone, but it goes back to the camaraderie of Marines and the leadership that we had the year I spent there then, and then probably that 2 years to kind of get some of it out of my system.
Transition, decompress a little.
Yeah. Had I gone home, that if I come home 1st July and I'm out of the service 1st August, I don't know what would have happened.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Do you think your experience in Vietnam affected the way you see or think about troops coming off the battlefields today from Afghanistan?
Oh, yeah, respect them. Yeah, yeah. They did exactly what we did, and thank God that because of that, Vietnam's getting a lot more respect. You know, it's and not so afraid to say that I am a Vietnam veteran. I guess there was a couple of times that when you said it was bad, I guess when I got out of the military, there was always job interviews and that. I never knew what that person on the other side might feel, so there was a lot of times I never put that I was a Vietnam veteran or even a veteran because you didn't know. You didn't. But I think that turned a lot with the Gulf War and then the wars since. But no, to me, they're heroes. Yeah, yeah.
Well, so are you guys. So how do you think the Vietnam War is remembered today?
I think in a better light. You know, there's always a few that, you know, I hope they feel sorry for what they've done to the Vietnam veterans, probably back in 69, 70, 71, especially 72. But no, it's great. I'm not afraid to say, I go buy anything now. I just say, hey, do I get a discount? I'm a Vietnam vet and an old man. What those two things, what can I get? So,
do you have any lessons that you took from that experience that you'd like to pass on to future generations?
oof, well, I don't know about lessons. Because, you know, one, I wasn't in the field that I wanted to be, you know, being a hospital corpsman. That wasn't by choice. It was just, hey, I want a class, so I got it. So you know, be happy, I guess. You know, whatever duties you're assigned to do, do them and be happy.
They're all important, right?
Something to that effect, I guess. Oh, fantastic. My first time, I had my family with us, and it was 1987, shortly after. I think it was like 82 it was dedicated, something like 83. So we were there in 1987. And before I saw the wall here in Washington, D.C., we saw the miniature one that floats around the nation.
Scale, yeah.
So that was probably the first time I saw it in Balboa Park. And
Okay.
it's probably the first time I really cracked up because I went up and got, well, he took my stuff, but I did Bart Haynes and Redford's and, and it never bothered me. You know, I got through all that just talking to people, but then to see it. And I think for the longest time, Chuck, my buddy, Chuck Bongers, there in Appleton, Wisconsin, we always just said, were you really there? And I think for many years, I thought maybe I didn't. You know, it's like a dream until that wall was made. So I think that kind of brought it to light, seeing Bart's name, and that makes you, yeah, you did. It wasn't a dream. Yeah, we did it. So yeah, I'm really, most of my life since then, I never dwelled on Vietnam. I kind of like, I buried it. I got a son and a daughter and a wife to take care of, and you know, it's like you probably always heard from World War II veterans. I don't know if you see it a lot more than I would, so I don't know if I'm going to be right on this one or not. Hardly any interviews, if I see it on TV and that, are like they're Pearl Harbor, but you never see, I hardly ever hear a Marine that was on Iwo Jima for that 2 months, or Tarawa, or because they either died, got wounded bad, or just, you know, come home and threw the uniform away and got on with their life, you know. Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm sold. I'm impressed. This has been a fantastic day. I think it's great. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Mr. Busch, thank you very, very much. That was superb.